Can someone start the recording?
Go ahead.
All right, thanks. Hi, everyone. Today is Wednesday, September 2nd, and this is the Cluster API office hours. Cluster API is a sub-project of SIG Cluster Lifecycle. Please follow the CNCF Code of Conduct, respect everyone, and if you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom. If you haven't already, go ahead and add your name to the attendee list on the doc and any topics that you'd like to bring up to the agenda. All right, so we are going to start with PSAs, and we have a big one since 039 was released yesterday. Vince, do you want to say anything about that?
Yes, so we had kind of like a release. It was quite something to get it out of the door. So the big warning here is like 039 does not support to upgrade 118 clusters to 119.0. We identified a bug to that pretty much like, so if you have components in your control plane, you have API server, you have the controller manager and all the other components. What happened during an upgrade was that the API server stayed on the 118 nodes, and the controller manager was elected on the new 119 node. And new APIs for certificate signing were moved to V1. So the controller manager was asking for V1 certificates, but the API server responded that like it didn't have that API version. And so the upgrade stalled and KCP couldn't move forward. So what ended up in the release was that we now disallow to upgrade entirely to 119.0. Any questions on that?
We expect 119.1 to have the fix and be released next Wednesday, right?
Yes, that is the current timeline. But yeah, we should definitely have the fix, and people should be able to upgrade at that point.
Fabrizio?
Just an update about the fix. The fix is being merged and backported, and we are fixing basically thanks to Lubomir for all the hard work, and we are fixing basically the controller manager and scheduler will be linked to the local API server. While triaging the issue, we discussed also the opportunity to link the kubelet to the local API server, but this change requires some major work, and it won't make the .1 release.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and thank you to everyone who huddled to like debug and investigate what was going on and get to the root cause of this problem. Are there any other questions about this specific topic? Cool. So we had said that 039 was going to be the last, big 0.3 release. What's the plan for, big feature PRs that are currently in the queue? Are we trying to get those into 0.310, or are we moving everything to 0.4?
There's a few things in the backlog that are at 0.310, although they have been either already discussed and they're good additions. The code is there, just need some fixing. So yeah, we can definitely merge those. They're pretty small. It's like a matter of adding conditions here and there. So, but yeah, like 0.310 hopefully is going to be our last release. We'll probably release more if if there's other bugs that like we find along the way. So just today, this morning, I created the release 0.3 branch and moved the book to point to the 0.3 branch as well. So now to actually make a release, like we will merge the bug fixes into the main branch and then backport it and then release. So it's a little bit more work, but it should work just fine.
Right. Okay. But for bigger changes that involve some like refactoring or restructuring of the codes, those should target 04, right?
Yeah, they won't be backported. Yeah.
Great. Okay.
I think there was one exception that we mentioned, that was KCP remediation though, but that depends on how it goes and how we feel about the changes to backport. If they're too invasive, we might not want to. But yeah, that was the only exception that was raised, like I think last week or 2 weeks ago.
Okay, thank you.
During planning.
Cool, just wanted to clarify. Okay, are there any other questions about 039?
No, I do have a little bit of another PSS on 039. There's two memory leaks that have been fixed. One was the runtime metrics, which have been completely removed from Alpha 3, given that one, they were not really useful, and two, they were using a high memory usage because of the cardinality of the sets. So like the more cluster you had, the more metrics. And I think it was also actually based on machines names, which is a pretty large cardinality set. And the other one was a bug, a memory leak in KCP. Was it the etcd connections that were not being properly closed. So definitely upgrade to 039 as soon as possible if you can.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, so moving on to discussion topics. James, you have the first one.
Hi, yeah, so Calia presented the CAPI Windows proposal last week. Thanks to everybody who commented on it. Just wanted to give a reminder to take another look. I didn't see any blocking issues or concerns. So we'll plan on opening up the PR for next week, but please take a look if you get a chance.
Sounds great, thank you. Any questions about the Windows proposal? Nope. All right, so please take a look when you have the chance. Oh, next one's mine actually. So I was just gonna bring up, so I saw Vince, you opened a PR this morning to write or kind of document our like compatibility like effort in terms of what breaking changes are acceptable and not currently in the project. And I was just going to propose, and I think you actually documented that, but I think in general, we should strive to always mark breaking changes as, the warning type commits, so that they're clearly documented in release notes, even if we accept those breaking changes, because, we're in alpha and some areas of the projects are going to be breaking changes, especially if we don't expect them to impact anyone because no one is using that particular function. I think we should still, like, as reviewers, always make sure that if the API diff job is failing, that comes with a warning commits message. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that, but I just think it would be easier if we communicate that more clearly in the release notes, so that at least we know what to expect when bumping the version. Any thoughts, questions, concerns?
Comment plus one. I think I covered this in a few places. The only exception I think that was in place was for CAPD, but all the others, like, yeah, should. But because mostly that's what we have been doing today. But if we want to change that as well, that I'm completely fine as long as like it's documented somewhere.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not proposing any changes to the policy or like what is acceptable as a breaking change for now, just, documenting or marking breaking changes as so. Cool. Any other questions? I don't see anyone raising their hand, so I'm going to assume everyone agrees. And thanks, Vince, for documenting it, so that way now it's more explicit. Cool. Okay, so Fabrizio, you have the next one, end-to-end test framework.
Thank you. So
logging.
basically, after investigating the problem around 119 upgrades, basically it was really evident that we are lacking some functionality in our end-to-end test, and the one which is most important, one of the most important is the ability for our end-to-end test to capture logs from the workload clusters. There was already an old issue or discussion around this, and I opened a PR a few hours ago in order to extend the end-to-end test framework to support a pluggable log collector. In the end-to-end framework, there is an implementation of the log collector that works with CAPD, but every provider should be able to inject their own log collector at the end. So at the end of each end-to-end test, basically the log collector is triggered, and you have the chance to implement your mechanism to connect to the machine, your specific mechanism to connect to the machine and fetch files. And yeah, if you have chance, please take a look, because this is something which is part of the framework, and everyone which is using the framework could benefit of it.
Yasin?
Yeah, Fabrizio, I'm very interested in this as we are in CAPV setting up a plan for our end-to-end tests, and we're trying to increase our coverage. So yeah, happy to help on this.
Any other questions, comments on logging? All right. I think it's really great that we're doing this. I've been wanting to see the logging for a while. So thank you, Fabrizio, for getting this done. All right, Daniel, you have the next two.
Thanks. Yeah, first one, I just wanted to say thanks to Fabrizio and for making CAPD easier to use. That's a really, for me personally, a really great improvement. So I just want to shout that out. And everybody who reviewed that PR and gave feedback. And, yeah, it's really nice. The other thing I just wanted to mention this again, start a conversation if others are interested. We've talked about in-place upgrades before at times. So yeah, just wanted to raise the balloon or whatever yet again. This time I just wanted to mention the, possible motivations, and wanted to get some feedback. Like, for example, if you have workloads that are, they're in memory that you want to preserve, you want to avoid draining, that might be a motivation to do in-place upgrades. That is where the machine isn't removed, where the node isn't even drained. I know that is like upgrading without draining is not even officially supported. But again, I just want to see if that's if that's a valid motivation. If others have this use case, love to talk about it and see what can or should change. Then the other motivation might be to if you have a larger cluster and you want to patch a CVE, and ordinarily maybe the upgrade process takes a long time, but you want to be able to patch quickly. That might be another reason. Also, would love to hear other motivations or use cases. So that's basically that. If you want to sync in offline in Slack, that would be great too. And that's it. Thanks.
Brian?
Yeah, hi. So in the book, in the Cluster API book, it states that machines are immutable. So I think you're actually going 2 steps here. You're saying not only am I going to change the machine, but I'm even going to avoid draining it. interested if you considered or what anyone thinks of actually changing the first step, which is just allowing mutability on machines.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, yeah, there might be ways to, you know, to work around that where you have a, you know, you actually end up changing the machine, but maybe preserving the node. I mean, I just want, if others are interested and think these are, you know, valid use cases that I've listed or have other use cases, I think it's great to continue the conversation, you know, notwithstanding the assumptions that we've been, you know, making thus far. And yeah, that's, yeah, I agree. Machines are immutable, and you know we've been working under the assumption. All our controllers work under that assumption. But if there are these use cases, it would be great to just think, what or how we can support them. Maybe if machines do remain immutable, maybe there are, like live pod migration, maybe that's a viable alternative. And yeah, I'm also interested in I guess others' experiences with, patching large numbers of nodes for CVEs, and yeah. So I'm not trying to make any claims, like where the project should go or what changes we should make. I really just want to get a conversation started, and that's it.
Andy, did you still want to say something? Or
no, I'm good, thanks.
okay, Michael.
Yeah, we do something similar in OpenShift. Not exactly what you're proposing, though. We have talked about updating different elements on disk without rebooting. I guess technically it's feasible, but in our model, the system configuration management is separated from the image deployment. So we're using mutable host layer, RHEL or Fedora CoreOS, and then that gets its configuration from a centralized system. So I guess the first issue that you'd run into with Cluster API proper is how would you define that in your machine deployment without rolling everything? So you have to really abstract things like kubelet version away from your image details, and so you basically need an entire configuration management system. I guess similar to kind of the model we have, but as far as do I think it's a good idea? Not really. In this case, to just update a kubelet version outside of all your configuration. I think it should, be done atomically, kind of like how we do it, or how upstream, how it's done here with the baked images and everything. That's really the only supportable story, I think. But as far as not breaking workloads that are running, pod disruption budgets are your answer there. That's why we introduced Drain to the machine controller. And so that gives users and administrators a lot of flexibility over how a machine actually gets replaced. So you can set a PDB of 0 disruptions if it's like a batch job. When that thing stops, Drain will complete, and then the machine will go away and you'll get a replacement. So I think it would definitely be nice to have from a lot of users' perspective. You're just opening up the surface area for problems overall.
Arvind Durpal.
Hello, thank you for bringing this up. Actually, I work for AT&T, and we have a very similar use case where, for example, so we use MetalCube quite a bit. We have a lot of bare metal clusters. And not only do we want to sort of maybe change the, let's say, the kubelet parameters, but oftentimes we want to do more general host configuration. That could be things like, maybe adding an IP tables rule, changing various kernel settings, all these things that can be done in place using something like syskettle, for example. So we were actually thinking of a more slightly different approach to doing this. And I have a proposal in the works right now that I'll definitely share with you guys. But the general idea is that while machines are immutable, recently there was discussion about making in-place changes possible at the machine template level. So the general idea is that, let's say something like MetalCube machine template can actually contain, for example, certain fields that can be mutated by the user. And the question would be then if, let's say you had like, a particular host configuration that you wanted mutated, and that was part of the machine template, and the user changed it, you would need some kind of mechanism to, first of all, map that machine template to the actual machines that were created from it. And then you would need some kind of an executor. For example, we had a POC where we were using something called Ansible operator, which could run various Ansible scripts, just as an example. So this executor, for example, would be told that, hey, the following template has changed, and these were the machines that were based on it. Go ahead and make those changes in place on those machines. So the executor would do its own magic. It's completely outside of the Cluster API or MetalCube world. Again, I just wanted to throw it out there, and thanks for bringing this up, but that's just one idea. And like I said, I'll definitely share the proposal as soon as possible.
Thanks. Vince?
Michael.
Michael?
Yes. We have a similar system in OpenShift we call a machine config operator, the machine config daemon, and the daemon runs as a daemon set on each node, and there's tags and labels, and it automatically compiles system configuration and then syncs it to the host and reboots it. It's primarily targeted at CoreOS based systems, but the skeletons there could be adopted to any number of other systems. So if that's something that you're interested in, that's pretty much how OpenShift does configuration management. So it's called the machine config operator.
Vince, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just to provide some background, like this conversation came up in the past, as Daniel mentioned. I'm glad that Daniel mentioned like we're not trying to necessarily change our current project goals. But it seems like, when we talked about this in the past, like there's definitely some ways to do this outside of Cluster API, and it doesn't have to be like part of like our API and support matrix. And yeah, like maybe we should just document it. Like this question comes up like probably every 6 months. But yeah, like maybe we should definitely put more documentation. It's like, hey, if you have these use cases, there's these tools out there, like the one, the machine config one, or the one that Anvil was proposing, that should live outside of the Cluster API project. So like we don't impact our roadmap to beta and GA. but that could fulfill other people's needs. And then we can think about more like, how do we make it more like approachable to do these mutable changes? Maybe it's just a matter of syncing back up like the changes to Cluster API with an external controller and things like that. And I also wanted to mention, like, there's also the Kuberium operator effort as well that like should do this. So if folks want to be involved in there, like I think Fabrizio and Lubomir are interested to push that forward at some point next year. But yeah, so.
Daniel?
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I guess yes, we have had this conversation before, and yes, I've heard that there are ways to do this outside of CAPI, but I haven't and forgive me if I'm being dense here, but I haven't really figured out how I would, for example, patch the kubelet version, if that's something that is, or rather, if how I would patch that on the machine, but without also upgrading the CAPI resources. But anyway, I'm happy to take that offline. If we can write some documentation, I would be very happy to drive that. And if others have ideas, then I'm happy to put those down on paper, as it were.
Michael?
I brought this up previously, but my whole thing is community versus project. So there's the Cluster API project, that's the code, and there's the community, that's all the people here and all the people that are using it. So I'm very interested in seeing and hearing more about these other use cases and seeing different components that people are using with Cluster API. So I think that's where a lot of the value is going to be going forward, like stamping out infrastructure. That's not a very interesting problem. But the part where we're managing the configurations and upgrades and accounting for all these different scenarios, I don't think that's something that can be done monolithically. So I think we should try to support people that want to do these other things inside of this kind of Cluster API world. And we should have a place for people that are interested in those things to collaborate on them, but doesn't necessarily have to be part of what lives in GitHub at the moment. I don't know how to facilitate that, maybe like a working group or something like that, but I definitely think there's a lot of people that want to collaborate, and we should try to enable them to do that.
Andy?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Michael. I think that we don't really have a single established place for people to come together and coordinate on use cases of Cluster API plus other things that's more than or different than this meeting or the GitHub repositories or the SIG cluster lifecycle Google group or the Discuss forum. Like it's I don't know what it would be, given that those tend to be the tools that we have at our disposal. But yeah, it would be nice to see some experiments, documentation, discussions around to go back to Daniel's discussion topic. I know how Cluster API is designed, and I'm interested in changing some file on my VMs, or what Arvinder was mentioning with syscontrols, and doing those live and trying to put together components that are distinct but can work together with Cluster API to do these sorts of things. So yeah, if there's a group of folks that want to try and get together and brainstorm how to collaborate and then start to pull in people from within this community and potentially outside, that would be fantastic.
Cool. Jack, did you want to ask your question out loud for the recording? Because the chat isn't saved.
That's so much more pressure, but I can give it a shot. Yeah. So
Okay, you
I
can
just
do it.
wanted to offer the observation that from my point of view and experience, it seems like Upgrade is less of an intrinsic Cluster API gesture and more of a sort of opinionated set of like using a bunch of Cluster API primitives in certain ways, according to certain orders and having certain failure scenarios and dependencies. It's that kind of a thing. Trying to figure out a single upgrade that would work for all customers and all environments would seem really hard. And I actually don't know enough about Cluster API Upgrade to know if that's just already built in, if that assumption is already baked into the functionality.
Hey, are you talking about KCP upgrades?
I guess I just mean all the stuff that we've been discussing, a bunch of different varieties of upgrades. So upgrade the Kubernetes version, maybe upgrade the underlying kernel OS, upgrade some other configuration management thing on a particular node or pool of nodes. And then we've also been talking about how that impacts the ideas that machines are immutable. And so that makes things slightly complicated. Like Daniel said, I don't even know how I would do an out-of-band, kubelet version upgrade without having my Cluster API machine definition somehow become marked as dirty and then try to override it. I assume that's what you meant, Daniel.
Sort of, yeah. It was just the resource would no longer actually hold the right, I guess, desired state. I don't think the controller would actually notice that the version has changed on the node, on the corresponding node.
Right, but there's definitely the idea that that machine resource contains the sort of canonical state representation, and then that becomes false at that point.
Sorry, I see exactly what you're saying now. And I think that's exactly correct. We have had the same exact problem in defining this behavior in Kubedium control plane, because we have a field that's called upgrade after, but it's a little bit misleading because it's actually it's just saying the spec is not up to date. I want to make it kind of up to date and matching. So yeah, I think that's a good observation. It might be good to actually add these concepts into the book.
Yeah, if you're being super academic about it, I think there's an argument that Cluster API Upgrade is out of scope for Cluster API. Cluster API exposes primitives that you can compose together to do things like quote unquote upgrade, but that's really a CLI orchestration responsibility, and it's not. There's no upgrade vector that's a part of the Cluster API spec.
Something I think along these same lines came up recently in Kappa, where people are working on EKS support, being able to run EKS clusters through CAPI. And there we have this problem that node images get removed by AWS, when they, I think they rev OS, when they make OS patches, they then make it so it automatically bumps you to the next. If you're just using EKS directly, it would bump you to the next, it'll roll your nodes or something, but that then collides with CAPI's need to control image IDs and stuff. And so it's kind of the same kind of problem of we need to disentangle the base OS from the Kubernetes bits, to be able to do, I think solve some of the same kinds of things that people are looking for here.
All right, thanks for bringing this up, Daniel. Definitely lots of people with lots of ideas, so it's good to have the conversation. I don't see any other hands raised, so I think that's it on this topic. Anyone have anything else that they want to add? Any questions, general comments before we end this meeting? Andy.
Thanks. So I did want to circle back to something we talked about a couple meetings ago around the next minor version of Cluster API, v1 Alpha 4 for the API version, and how long we'll keep main open for 0.3 changes, and when will we open it for breaking changes. I did see that Vince created the release 0.3 branch, mainly, or at least initially motivated by the docs discussion from a previous meeting and trying to keep the docs aligned with what we've shipped. So thanks for doing that, Vince. I just wanted to ask the group, maintainers in particular, do we still want to wait until the end of September to open up for breaking changes? Or now that we have the release 0.3 branch, should we get started?
Raise my hand. I think we should at least wait a week after the release to, give us time to uncover any issues or critical problems, if any. Vince says proposals first in the chat.
Yeah, if we
Yeah,
can use this
that makes
month.
sense. And I know that for Kubernetes, for example, there is a features proposal time period where the community can propose what features they'd like to have included in the upcoming milestone. And then there's a feature freeze date. And if the, for the Kubernetes project, if the SIGs that are appropriate for a given feature haven't approved it, then it won't necessarily make the milestone and it might get kicked out. So we don't exactly have that, but we do, or we could put together something around getting proposals approved by some cutoff date. And if you miss it, then you've got to wait for the next release. Maybe we should try and put together some sort of lightweight release cycle process.
Yeah, I think we briefly discussed it during the backlog grooming, I think. And we mentioned we wanted to have the whole month of September pretty much like to start understanding what the roadmap is, and then kind of propose the roadmap. I don't know if all the proposals can go in and get approved. Hopefully they can in just 1 month, but given the history, like we took probably 6+ weeks sometimes to review things. So yeah, we can, how about we come up with a calendar and then maybe we'll go probably like into the first 2 weeks of October. And we'll see if that works for everybody.
Sounds good. Can we attempt to have that calendar proposed by next meeting? Is that a reasonable amount of time?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns about v1 Alpha 4 changes? All right. Cool. So before we end, I didn't do this at the beginning, but if anyone here is new and would like to introduce themselves and just say hi, tell us a bit about, why you joined this meeting, what brings you to Cluster API. I'll leave a few minutes for that. So go ahead and just unmute yourself if you'd like. no pressure. Scott?
Hey there. Yeah, so, oh, sorry. Can you see me better now? Yeah, so I'm Scott Rigby. I am just interested generally in what Cluster API can do. I've been maintaining clusters at least in the past role, and relied pretty heavily on TOPS as well as other methods. And just what Cluster API promises just seems like the right way to go. I also, in other areas of my life, I'm a Helm maintainer, and I just am generally interested in this space. So I thought I would join. Nice to meet you all.
Cool. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. I'm going to take that as a no. Cool. So I think that's it for today. Thanks everyone for joining. See you all on Slack and GitHub, and have a great rest of your Wednesday. Bye.